What if everything you see, touch and call real is not reality itself, but a projection generated by your own mind? Ancient philosophers from Hermes, Trismegistus to Plato left behind a dangerous idea. Music consciousness does not observe reality, it creates it. And by the end you will understand exactly how and why most people never discover this. Before we begin, consider this quietly. Have you ever noticed how your world changes when your inner state changes? Hold that question, because what you're about to hear may explain it completely. Chapter 1. The Hidden Principle of Mind. There was a teaching whispered through centuries and preserved in fragments of forgotten scrolls that began with a statement so simple most dismissed it before understanding its weight. The universe is not made of matter. It is made of mind. This was the foundation of the ancient writings known as the Corpus Hermeticum, attributed to the mysterious figure Hermes Trismegistus. To the untrained ear, it sounded like poetry. To those who study deeply, it was a warning, because if reality is mental, then nothing you experience is truly separate from the nature of your own consciousness. There is an old story passed quietly among hermetic circles of a student who approached a master in a desert temple. The student had traveled far seeking power over life itself. He asked, "Teach me how to change the world." The master did not answer. Instead, he handed the student a polished obsidian mirror and said, "Look for knowledge," he said, frustrated. "And you have been given it," the master replied. The student grew impatient. "This changes nothing." The master leaned closer and whispered, "Then you do not yet understand what you are looking at." Days passed. The student returned again and again, staring into the mirror, searching for hidden symbols, secret messages, anything beyond the surface. But there was nothing, only himself. Until one evening, exhausted and no longer searching, he noticed something subtle. His expression changed, and the reflection changed instantly with it. Not a moment later, not delayed, immediately. And in that instant, the teaching revealed itself. The world you see does not move independently of you. It responds. The ancients did not mean that mountains appear or disappear at will. They meant something far more precise and far more dangerous. Your perception, your interpretation, your emotional state shape the structure of your reality in ways so constant, so immediate that you no longer notice the connection. Mind is not passive, it is formative. This idea echoed again centuries later in works like the Kabbalion, which translated the ancient teaching into simpler language. The all is mind, the universe is mental. But even then, most read it as philosophy. Few treated it as instruction. Because to accept this fully means accepting responsibility for something most people would rather avoid. Music, you are not merely experiencing your life. You are participating in its creation. Consider something simple. Two men walk into the same room. Nothing changes in the environment. Music, same walls, same people, same conditions. One feels tension, threat, unease. The other feels opportunity, curiosity, calm. The external world remains identical. Yet their realities are completely different. Why? Because reality as experienced is filtered through the mind, and the filter is not neutral. It is shaped by belief, memory, expectation, and attention. Modern psychology would describe this as cognitive framing. The ancients described it more directly. You do not see the world as it is. Music, you see it as you are. This is where the danger of this knowledge begins. Because once you understand that perception is not passive, you begin to see patterns you once ignored. You notice how fear narrows your world, how anger distorts it, how expectation shapes outcomes before events even unfold. And slowly, a deeper realization emerges. What you call reality is not a fixed structure. It is an ongoing process, a conversation between consciousness and experience. And like any conversation, it can change if one side changes. But here is where many misunderstand the teaching. They attempt to control everything. They try to force thoughts, suppress emotions, manufacture positivity, and in doing so, they create tension because control is not the same as understanding. The ancient masters never taught domination of the mind. They taught awareness of it because awareness reveals patterns. And once patterns are seen clearly, they begin to loosen naturally. There is a quiet shift that happens when you stop treating thoughts as truth and begin treating them as events. You create space, and in that space, something subtle but powerful begins to emerge. Choice not over the world directly, but over the way the world is experienced and therefore shaped. This is the first key. Mind precedes matter, not in a mystical sense alone, but in the structure of everyday life. Every reaction, every decision, every interpretation begins within, and from there it moves outward. So the question is no longer music, what is happening to me? It becomes what is my mind doing with what is happening, because in that shift from external blame to internal awareness, the foundation of reality itself begins to reveal its true nature. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. Chapter 2, The World is Reflection. There is a story told in the teachings of Plato that is echoed through centuries, not because it is complex, but because it is uncomfortably accurate. It is known as the allegory of the cave. In it, prisoners are chained inside a dark cavern facing a wall. Behind them burns a fire music, and between the fire and the prisoners, figures pass carrying objects. The prisoners cannot turn their heads. They see only shadows projected onto the wall, and over time they come to believe those shadows are reality itself. They give them names, they assign them meaning, they build an entire understanding of the world based on illusions until one prisoner is freed. At first he resists. The light hurts his eyes. The real world feels overwhelming, even threatening, but slowly his vision adjusts, and he realizes something profound. Everything he once believed to be real was only a reflection. When he returns to tell the others, they reject him. They prefer the certainty of shadows to the discomfort of truth. This story was never meant to describe physical caves. It describes the human mind, because what you experience daily is not reality in its raw form. It is interpretation filtered through perception, colored by belief, structured by expectation. And once you understand this, something unsettling begins to happen. You start to question how much of your life is direct experience and how much is projection. There was once a craftsman in a small village who believed himself to be cursed. Every project he worked on seemed to fail, would split unexpectedly. Measurements came out wrong. Customers complained. He became convinced that life itself was working against him. One day, an old philosopher passed through the village and observed his work. After watching quietly, he said, "You measure with hesitation." The craftsman frowned. "What does that mean?" "You expect error," the philosopher replied, "music, and so your hands created." The craftsman dismissed the idea at first, but later he began to observe himself and he noticed something subtle. Every time he worked, there was tension in his movements, doubt in his decisions. He checked measurements repeatedly, not from precision, but from fear. Music, and in that fear, mistakes multiplied. Nothing external had changed, music, but his internal state was shaping his results. This is the deeper meaning of reflection. Reality does not simply present itself. It interacts with the state of the observer. This is not mystical exaggeration. It is visible in everyday life. A person who expects rejection behaves differently than one who expects acceptance. A person who believes in scarcity sees fewer opportunities than one who believes in possibility. The environment remains constant. The experience changes music because perception influences action and action influences outcome. This creates a loop, one that reinforces itself over time. Perception shapes behavior, behavior shapes results, results reinforce belief, and so the cycle continues. The ancients understood this loop long before modern psychology gave it names. They warned that most people live inside it unconsciously, mistaking the reflection for the source. Reacting to outcomes without examining the beliefs that created them. This is why awakening to this truth feels disorienting at first, because it shifts responsibility. It removes the comfort of blaming circumstances alone, but it also introduces something far more powerful, the possibility of change. If reality as experienced is partly constructed through perception, then altering perception alters experience. Not instantly, not magically, but consistently. There is a moment in every person's life where this becomes undeniable. A shift in mindset leads to a shift in outcome. A new perspective opens possibilities that were previously invisible, and suddenly the world seems different. But in truth, the world did not change first. The lens did. This is the second key. The world you experience is not only what is in front of you, it is what your mind allows you to see, and once you understand that perception is active, not passive, you begin to approach life differently. You question assumptions, you observe reactions, you notice patterns, and in doing so you slowly step out of the cave. Not all at once, but gradually with each moment of awareness, the shadows lose their authority and something more stable begins to take their place. Clarity, not perfect clarity, but enough to recognize that what you once called reality music was only a reflection shaped by the mind observing it, and that realization changes everything. Music, because it means the world is not as fixed as it once seemed. It is responsive, subtle, malleable in ways most never notice, and those who do begin to see differently, act differently, and eventually live differently. Chapter 3. The Emanation of Mind. You are a fragment of the source. There was once a philosopher who walked the quiet courtyards of Alexandria, speaking rarely, yet observing everything. His name was Plotinus, and those who sat in his presence often felt as though they were being seen from within, not merely looked at from without. When asked where reality begins, he did not point outward to the stars, the temples, or the cities, but inward toward the silent center of awareness itself. He taught that all things flow from a single source. He called the one, not a god in the common sense, but a boundless unified consciousness from which all existence emanates. Like light pouring from the sun, reality unfolds in layers. First comes pure awareness, then thought, music, then form, and finally the physical world you believe to be solid and fixed. This was not poetry, it was a map. You are not separate from this source. You are an extension of it. Your consciousness is not isolated. It is a localized expression of a universal mind. Just as a wave belongs to the ocean, your awareness belongs to something infinitely greater, yet it carries the same nature. This changes everything, because if your consciousness is part of the source from which reality emerges, then your inner state is not a passive reflection. It is an active participant in creation. What you consistently hold in your mind begins to shape the layer beneath it, and that layer eventually takes form in the world you experience. Most people never realize this. They believe their thoughts are reactions. In truth, they are origins. Consider a man who walks through life convinced he is unworthy. He does not see this belief as a creative force, only as a feeling. Yet over time, his relationships reflect distance, his opportunities narrow, and his world seems to confirm what he already assumes. He calls this fate. But what he is witnessing is emanation, the inner pattern flowing outward. The world mirrors the mind always. Plotinus warned that forgetting this truth leads to fragmentation. When you identify only with the outer layers, the body, the circumstances, the passing events, you lose contact with the source. You begin to believe you are at the mercy of reality music rather than a contributor to its unfolding. But the moment you remember, the direction reverses. You begin to move from inside outward. You choose your inner state with intention. You refine your thoughts not to escape reality, but to shape it at its origin. Music, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the outer world begins to reorganize itself. This is not immediate magic. It is precise law. The ancient teaching is simple, though rarely understood. Music, what flows from within, determines what forms without. And here is the practice. Each morning before the world begins to speak to you, music, sit in stillness for a few moments. Ask yourself one question. What is the quality of mind I will emanate today? Not what you will do, but what you will be. Clarity, calm, strength. Hold that state even briefly, because what you hold internally does not stay contained. It radiates. It influences perception, decision, action, and ultimately outcome. The source is not distant. It is operating through you now. Remember this, and the illusion of separation begins to dissolve. Chapter 4. The Mirror of Forms. Why reality reflects not initiates. In the dialogues of Plato, there is a story that is echoed across centuries. The allegory of the cave. Prisoners sit chained facing a wall, watching shadows cast by objects behind them. To them, the shadows are reality. They argue about them, fear them, even build their identities around them. But they never turn around to see what creates the images. Most people still live in that cave. They believe the visible world is the cause of their experience. They see circumstances as fixed external forces that shape their lives. Yet Plato insisted that what we perceive through the senses is not the true origin. It is a projection, a reflection of deeper forms that exist beyond physical sight. Reality is downstream, not upstream. The forms, the patterns, ideas, and structures of existence are accessed through the mind, not the eyes. And this is where the dangerous truth begins to emerge. Your consciousness does not merely observe these forms. It interacts with them, it aligns with them, and in doing so, it determines what is reflected back into your world. Think of reality as a mirror, not a machine. A mirror does not create, it reflects. But what it reflects depends entirely on what stands before it. If you stand in front of it in darkness, it shows darkness. If you bring light, it reveals light. The world works the same way. A woman once spent years believing that life was unfair. Everywhere she looked, she found evidence, missed opportunities, difficult people, constant setbacks. To her, this was proof. But when she began examining her own assumptions, she noticed something subtle. She expected unfairness before it appeared. She interpreted neutral events as negative. She focused on what confirmed her belief and ignored what contradicted it. Her reality had not changed. Her perception had. And with that shift, something remarkable happened. As she began to question her inner narrative, new possibilities appeared, ones that had always been present but unseen. Opportunities that once passed unnoticed became visible. Interactions softened. Outcomes shifted, not instantly but consistently. This is the mirror effect. Plato's teaching was not abstract philosophy. It was a warning. If you mistake the reflection for the source, you will spend your life trying to change shadows instead of light. You will fight circumstances without ever addressing the patterns that produce them. And this leads to frustration because no matter how hard you try to rearrange the outer world, it will continue to reflect the inner structure of your mind. Effort applied in the wrong direction creates resistance, not change. But when you reverse the process, when you begin with the mind, the reflection must follow. This is the law few understand. Your beliefs act as lenses. Your expectations act as filters. Together they determine what you notice, what you ignore, and how you interpret what happens. Over time, this creates a consistent experience that feels like reality, but is in truth a reflection of alignment. So here is the practice. At the end of each day, choose one moment that disturbed you, not the entire day, just one event. Then ask, what did I assume in that moment? What did I expect? What meaning did I assign? Do not judge the answer, just observe it. Because in that observation, you begin to see the pattern behind the reflection, and once you see the pattern, you can change it. This is where power returns. The cave is not a prison, it is a misunderstanding. The shadows are not enemies, they are signals. They show you what is being projected from within. Turn toward the source and the shadows lose their grip. Reality is not happening to you, music, it is responding to you. And once you understand this, you stop chasing outcomes and start shaping origins. Chapter 5. The Law of the Inner Word, Thought as Creative Force. In the quiet halls of ancient learning, long before the noise of modern certainty, music, there was a teaching preserved in the writings attributed to Hermes Majestus. A teaching both simple and unsettling in its implication. The all is mind, not metaphor, not poetry, law. It was said that before form, before matter, before even the stars took their place in the heavens, there existed a single field of intelligence, a living awareness from which all things emerged. The world then was not built like a structure of stone, but spoken into existence through a deeper order of thought. This is why the ancients treated the mind with reverence, not casually as we do now. They understood that thought is not idle, it is generative, it is formative. It is creative in ways that unfold slowly yet with absolute consistency. Your thoughts are not whispers, they are instructions. Consider a craftsman shaping clay upon a wheel. His hands move gently, almost effortlessly, yet the form that emerges obeys every subtle pressure. If his touch is steady, the vessel becomes balanced. If his hand trembles, the structure distorts. The clay does not resist, it responds. So does reality. Music. There was once a merchant in a coastal city who lived in constant expectation of loss. Though his business prospered outwardly, inwardly he rehearsed failure. He anticipated betrayal. He imagined collapse. And slowly over years small fractures appeared, misjudged deals, broken trust, careless decisions. Eventually what he feared took form. He called it bad luck. But an old teacher hearing his story asked only one question. What have you been saying to yourself when no one else could hear? The merchant had no answer, not at first, because most people do not hear their own inner dialogue. It runs beneath awareness, shaping emotion, guiding action, filtering perception. It is constant. It is repetitive and it is powerful beyond measure. The ancient texts hinted at this again and again, not through modern language but through symbols and principles. The word, the logos, the divine mind. These were not distant abstractions. They were descriptions of the same underlying truth, that reality unfolds according to patterns of thought. And here is where the danger and the power reveals itself. If your mind is undisciplined, your reality becomes unstable. If your inner speech is filled with contradiction, fear, or doubt, the outcomes you experience will reflect that fragmentation, not immediately, but inevitably. This is why many people feel trapped in cycles they cannot explain. They attempt to change their lives through action alone while leaving the source, the inner word, unchanged. And so the pattern repeats. But when the inner word becomes clear, something shifts. There was a woman who, after years of struggle, began a simple practice. Each morning, before speaking to anyone, she would sit in silence and listen to her own thoughts, not to control them, but to observe them. At first, What she heard disturbed her. There was criticism, fear, and quiet expectation of failure woven into nearly every sentence. She had been speaking against herself for years, so she began to intervene, not forcefully but deliberately. When a thought arose that diminished her, she replaced it. When doubt appeared, she acknowledged it, then redirected it, not perfectly, not instantly, music, but consistently. Months passed, then years, and slowly the outer conditions of her life began to reorganize. Opportunities appeared where there had been none. Relationships shifted. Her sense of identity strengthened. It was not sudden transformation. It was gradual alignment. The clay had changed shape. This is the law the ancients guarded so carefully. Your inner speech becomes your outer structure, not because the world bends to wishes, but because your thoughts influence perception. Perception guides action, and action determines outcome. The chain is subtle but unbroken. So here is the practice for one day, just one. Become aware of the sentences you repeat within your own mind. Do not try to fix them all. Simply notice, especially in moments of stress, frustration, or uncertainty. Then choose one phrase you often repeat that weakens you and replace it with one that strengthens you. Not fantasy, not illusion, just clarity. Instead of "I can't handle this," try "I will respond with clarity." Instead of "this always goes wrong," try "I will meet this differently." Small shifts, powerful direction. Because the mind listens to itself, and what it hears it begins to build. The law is already in motion. The question is whether you will guide it or be shaped by it. Chapter 6. The alignment with Logos, when consciousness meets order. Among the Stoics, there was a concept both simple and profound. A principle they believed governed not only the cosmos, but the human mind itself. They called it Logos, a rational organizing intelligence that flows through all things, giving structure to chaos and meaning to existence. It was not merely philosophy, it was orientation. For thinkers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, the greatest suffering did not come from external events, but from living out of alignment with this deeper order. When your thoughts contradict reality, you experience conflict. When your expectations defy nature, you experience frustration. But when your mind aligns with Logos, when your thinking reflects truth rather than illusion, something remarkable happens. Life becomes clearer, not easier in the sense of comfort, but smoother in the sense of movement. You stop music, resisting what cannot be controlled. You stop clinging to what cannot be held, and in doing so, you free your energy for what can actually be shaped. This is where power begins. There is a story told of a man who lost nearly everything in a single season. His work, music, his savings, and his sense of direction. At first, he reacted as most would. Anger, blame, confusion. He fought against what had already occurred, replaying it in his mind, demanding a different outcome from a fixed past. But nothing changed, until one day, in a moment of quiet exhaustion, he asked a different question. Not "why did this happen," but "what remains within my control now?" The shift was subtle, but it was everything. He began to separate what was external from what was internal. The loss external, the response internal, music, the circumstances fixed, the interpretation flexible, and from that clarity, action emerged. He rebuilt not from desperation, but from alignment. Each decision was grounded, not reactive. Music, each step forward was deliberate, not frantic. And though the process took time, the foundation he created was stronger than what had been lost. This is the Stoic path, not passive acceptance but intelligent alignment. The mistake most people make is believing that control means forcing outcomes, but the Stoics understood something deeper. Control lies not in events, but in response. And response, when guided by reason, becomes a powerful instrument. This is not about suppressing emotion. It is about directing attention, because where your attention goes, your interpretation follows, and where your interpretation settles, your experience forms. If you see every obstacle as injustice, your world becomes hostile. If you see challenge as information, your world becomes instructive. Same events, different alignment. And here is where this teaching intersects with the greater law of consciousness. When your mind aligns with truth, when it reflects reality accurately without distortion, it becomes a clear channel. Decisions improve, perception sharpens, action becomes efficient, and the outcomes you experience begin to reflect that clarity. Not because the universe is rewarding you, but because you are no longer working against its structure. You are working with it. Music, so here is the practice. The moment something disrupts your day, a delay, a mistake, a conflict, pause briefly and ask, "Is this within my control?" If the answer is no, release the need to change it. If the answer is yes, focus only on the next effective action, nothing more. This single distinction practice consistently creates a profound shift. It removes wasted energy. It sharpens focus. It restores agency. And over time, it aligns your consciousness with something deeper than preference, something closer to truth. Because the power of the human mind is not in forcing reality, music it is in understanding it and moving with it. That is alignment. That is clarity, music, and that is where real influence begins. Chapter 7, The Illusion of Solid Reality. When the world is not what it seems. There was a moment in the teachings of Plato where the student is asked a question that appears simple yet fractures the foundation of certainty. What you see, how do you know it is real, not useful, not practical, but real in its essence? Most never ask this. They move through life assuming that what appears before them is fixed, objective, and independent of their awareness. Music, the table is solid, the path is certain, the outcome is determined. And yet the ancient philosophers whispered something far more unsettling. What you perceive is not reality itself, but a filtered interpretation shaped by the mind. The senses report. The mind decides. This distinction is everything. There was once a traveler who crossed 2 villages in a single day. In the first, he found kindness, laughter, and welcome. In the second, he encountered hostility, distance, and suspicion. When asked about his journey, he declared the first village blessed and the second cursed. But an old observer who had watched him closely noticed something different. In the first village, the traveler approached others with openness. In the music second, he carried tension, suspicion, and guardedness. The villages had not changed. The man had music and the world reflected it. This is the illusion of solidity, the belief that reality exists independently of perception. But in truth, your experience of reality is always mediated through your thoughts, your expectations, your emotional state. You are not seeing the world as it is. You are seeing it as you are. This does not mean the world is imaginary. Music, it means it is responsive. The ancient teachings, especially those rooted in Hermetic thought, suggested that matter itself is not the final layer of existence. It is the outermost expression of deeper patterns, patterns shaped by mind, by structure, by unseen order. What appears solid is in truth the end result of processes far more subtle. Modern language might call this perception bias, cognitive filtering, or mental framing. But the ancients described it differently. They called it illusion. Not false in existence, but incomplete in understanding. And here is where the danger lies. When you believe the outer world is the cause of your inner state, you become reactive. You wait for circumstances to change before you allow yourself clarity, peace, or confidence. You become dependent on what you cannot fully control. But when you understand that your inner state shapes how reality is experienced, and over time how it unfolds, you begin to reclaim authorship not over everything music, but over the most important thing, your interpretation. There was a woman who lived through years of instability, financial, relational, emotional. Each event reinforced her belief that life was unpredictable and unsafe. And because she believed this, she interpreted every uncertainty as threat, every delay as failure, every silence as rejection. Music, her world felt chaotic. But when she began to examine not the events but her interpretation of them, something shifted. She noticed how quickly she assigned negative meaning, how automatically she expected the worst, and slowly, deliberately she began to interrupt that pattern. She did not deny difficulty, she redefined it. A delay became time to prepare. A setback became information. A challenge became a test of response rather than a confirmation of failure. Music, and over time her experience of life changed. Not because the world softened, but because her perception sharpened. This is the practice of seeing beyond the surface. Each time something occurs, there is the event, and then there is the meaning you assign to it. Music, most people collapse these into one. They believe the meaning is inherent in the event, but it is not. Meaning is chosen. And once you see this, you gain a subtle but profound power, the ability to reinterpret, to reframe, to respond differently, and in doing so to alter the trajectory of your experience. So here is the practice. When something happens that disturbs you, pause and separate the event from your interpretation. State it plainly, this is what happened. Then ask, what meaning am I giving this? You may find that the meaning is not fixed, and in that realization, the illusion begins to loosen. Reality is not as solid as it seems. It is shaped moment by the mind that observes it. Chapter 8. The Return to the Source, Remembering the Mind Behind the World. In the deeper layers of ancient teaching beyond philosophy and into what some called the hidden doctrine, there was a recurring idea. one that appeared in different forms across cultures, yet pointed to the same truth, that human consciousness is not separate from the force that creates reality, but an expression of it. This idea was preserved in Hermetic traditions, echoed in Platonic thought, and later woven into the concept known as Piariska theologia, the belief that a single ancient truth runs through all wisdom traditions waiting to be rediscovered. The truth is simple, and it is rarely understood. You are not merely in the world. The world as you experience it is in you. There was a scholar who spent years studying the nature of consciousness. He read every text, examined every theory, and debated every perspective, yet no answer satisfied him. Everything felt incomplete, intellectually rich, but experientially hollow. Until one evening, in a moment of exhaustion, he stopped searching outward and turned inward. Not to think, but to observe, he noticed something he had overlooked his entire life. Music, every experience, every sight, every sound, every sensation appeared within his awareness, not outside it, not separate from it, within it. The world as he knew it existed as a field of perception inside his own consciousness. This realization did not come as a thought, it came as a shift, and with that shift, the question changed. He was no longer asking music, what is reality, but what is this awareness in which reality appears? This is the return to the source. The ancients hinted at this through layered language. They spoke of the divine mind, the inner light, the spark of the all. These were not metaphors for something distant. They were descriptions of something immediate yet unnoticed. Music, your awareness is not passive. It is foundational. Everything you know, everything you experience, music, arises within it. And yet most people never examine it. They focus on the contents of consciousness, music, the thoughts, the emotions, the events, while ignoring the field in which those contents appear. It is like studying waves without ever noticing the ocean. But when you turn your attention toward awareness itself, something begins to shift. The sense of separation softens. The rigid boundary between self and world becomes less defined. This is the beginning of inner governance. The Stoics understood that the mind left untrained becomes reactive. It moves from impulse to impulse, from fear to desire, from expectation to disappointment. And because these movements are internal, they often go unnoticed, yet they shape everything. Your reactions create your reality, not directly, but through a chain of influence. A reaction shapes perception. Perception guides action. Action produces outcome, and outcome reinforces belief. The cycle continues, often without interruption. But when you interrupt it, when you pause between stimulus and response, you introduce something rare: choice. This pause is power. It is small, often only a few seconds, but within it lies the ability to step outside the automatic pattern and respond differently. Not based on habit, but on intention, not driven by impulse, but guided by clarity. Music. There was a man known for his temper, quick to anger, sharp in speech, often regretting his words only after they had caused damage. He believed this was simply who he was, that his reactions were natural, unavoidable, until one day, after a particularly destructive outburst, someone asked him a simple question. Music, did you choose that response? He had no answer, because for the first time he realized he had not chosen at all. So he began a practice. Each time he felt the surge of anger, he would pause just briefly and take a breath before speaking. At first, it changed nothing. Music, the anger was still there, the impulse still strong, but the pause grew. Seconds became moments, moments became space, and within that space he began to see alternatives, responses that were measured, controlled, deliberate. Over time his relationships improved, not because others changed, but because he did. This is inner governance, it is not suppression. It is direction, and it requires discipline, not in the sense of harsh control, but in the sense of consistent awareness, the willingness to observe your own mind, to question your own reactions, and to choose your responses with intention. So here is the practice. For one day, focus on a single reaction, perhaps irritation, impatience, or worry. Each time it arises, do not act immediately. Pause, take one breath, then respond. Just one breath. It seems insignificant, but it is the beginning of mastery. Because the moment you can pause, you are no longer controlled by the pattern, you are shaping it, and that is where freedom begins. Chapter 10, The Power of Mental Correspondence. As within, so without. Among the most enduring principles attributed to Hermes Trismegistus is a statement so concise that many dismiss it, and yet so profound that it underlies nearly every ancient system of thought, as within, so without. It is often repeated, rarely understood, Most interpret it as a poetic idea that your inner state somehow influences your outer world. But the ancients did not speak in vague metaphors. They spoke in principles, laws that operate whether or not you recognize them. This is one of those laws. The outer world reflects the inner structure of your mind. Not instantly, not magically, but consistently over time. Your beliefs, your expectations, your emotional patterns, they shape how you perceive, how you act, and ultimately what you experience. The correspondence is subtle music, but it is precise. There was a woman who believed deeply and without question that people could not be trusted. This belief had formed early through experience and had remained unchallenged for years. As a result, she approached every relationship with caution, distance, and quiet suspicion. And what did she experience? Distance, misunderstanding, occasional betrayal. To her, this was confirmation. But what she could not see was the role her own belief played in shaping these outcomes. Her guardedness prevented genuine connection. Her suspicion created tension. Her expectation of betrayal influenced how she interpreted others' actions. The outer world reflected the inner assumption. This is correspondence. It does not mean you control everything that happens. It means you influence how it unfolds in your experience. The same event interpreted differently leads to different actions, and different actions lead to different results. The law operates through you. There was another man raised in similar circumstances who carried a different belief that while not everyone could be trusted, connection was still possible. He approached others with openness, but not naivety. He listened more than he assumed. He gave space for understanding before judgment. And his experience, more trust, more cooperation, more meaningful relationships, same world, different correspondence. This is where the ancient teachings intersect with modern understanding. Today we might speak of cognitive bias, behavioral patterns, or emotional conditioning, but the essence remains unchanged. Your inner state shapes your outer experience, not completely but significantly. And once you recognize this, you gain the ability to adjust the correspondence. There was a period in a man's life where everything seemed to go wrong. Missed opportunities, strained relationships, constant setbacks. He began to examine not the events, but the pattern, what was consistent across all these experiences himself. So he turned inward, not to blame, but to understand. He noticed a pattern of expectation, subtle but persistent, that things would not work out, music, that effort would not be rewarded. That disappointment was inevitable, and without realizing it, he had been acting in ways that fulfilled that expectation. Hesitating when opportunity appeared, withdrawing when connection was possible, preparing for failure even before beginning. The correspondence was exact, so he began to change not the world, but his internal orientation. He questioned his assumptions. He adjusted his expectations. He chose to act as though success were possible even if uncertain. Music, at first nothing changed, but over time small shifts appeared. Opportunities were noticed. Conversations improved. Outcomes began to differ, not dramatically but consistently. This is how the law works, not through sudden transformation but through gradual alignment. So here is the practice. Choose one belief you hold about your life, something you assume to be true, then ask, how might this belief be shaping my actions? How might it be influencing what I notice, what I ignore, what I expect? Do not rush the answer, because in that question lies awareness, music, and in awareness lies the possibility of change. If the belief is limiting, experiment with a different one, not blindly but deliberately. Act as though a more constructive assumption were true. Observe what changes. You are not forcing reality. You are adjusting the correspondence. And as you do, the outer world begins quietly, steadily to reflect the shift within. This is not illusion. It is alignment. And once you understand it, you no longer see the world as something that happens to you, but as something that responds through you. Chapter 11. The Veil of Certainty. Why the Mind Clings to Illusion. There is a quiet danger in certainty, one that the ancient thinkers warned against, yet most people embrace without question. It is the belief that what you already know is sufficient, that your current understanding is complete, that your perception of reality requires no further examination. This is how the mind traps itself. Even Socrates, who was regarded as one of the wisest men of his time, claimed only this, that he knew nothing, not as a gesture of humility, but as a recognition of something deeper, that the moment you believe you fully understand, you stop seeing clearly. Certainty closes the door. Awareness opens it. There was once a respected scholar who had spent decades studying philosophy, convinced he had reached a point of clarity. He could explain the nature of reality, debate the structure of the mind, and quote ancient texts with precision. Yet despite all his knowledge, his life remained restless, filled with subtle dissatisfaction. One day a traveler visited him, a man with no formal education, no scholarly reputation, yet a calm presence that unsettled the scholar's confidence. They spoke for hours. At one point, the traveler asked a simple question. Everything you know, how much of it have you tested within yourself? The scholar paused because for the first time he realized that much of his knowledge was borrowed, ideas understood intellectually but not lived, not examined through direct experience. He had mistaken information for wisdom, and in doing so he had built a structure of certainty that prevented deeper insight. This is the veil. The mind prefers familiarity. It clings to patterns that feel stable even if they are limiting. It defends beliefs not because they are true, but because they are known. And once a belief becomes fixed, it filters perception, allowing only what confirms it, rejecting what challenges it. This is how illusion sustains itself. There was a man who believed that success required constant struggle, that ease was a sign of weakness, that progress must be difficult to be meaningful. Music, this belief guided his actions for years. He overworked, overthought, and resisted anything that felt too simple. And so his life became exactly what he expected, difficult. Music, when someone suggested that effort could be balanced, that progress could come through clarity rather than strain, he dismissed it. Not because it was false, but because it contradicted what he already believed. The mind protects its illusions, but when he finally began to question this assumption, not to reject it, but to examine it, something shifted. He noticed moments where ease produced better results than force. He saw how tension disrupted his focus. He realized that his belief had not been truth, but conditioning, and once he saw it, he could change it. This is the beginning of clarity, not replacing one belief with another blindly, but loosening the grip of certainty, allowing space for observation, questioning what feels obvious, testing what seems unquestionable, because truth does not fear examination, and the mind, when freed from rigid certainty, becomes capable of deeper perception. It becomes flexible, adaptive, open to correction. It begins to see not just what confirms its expectations, but what actually is. So here is the practice. Choose one belief you hold with strong conviction, something you rarely question. Then ask yourself, how do I know this is true? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Do not rush to defend it. Simply observe, because in that observation the veil begins to thin, and through that thinning clarity emerges not as something imposed, but as something revealed. The greatest obstacle to understanding is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge, and once you see that, the path to deeper awareness opens. Chapter 12. The reorientation of identity, becoming the one who shapes reality. There is a subtle but profound shift that occurs when a person moves from reacting to life to consciously shaping their experience of it. It is not a change in circumstance, but a change in identity, and identity, more than anything else, determines the direction of your life. The ancient philosophers understood this, though they spoke of it in different terms. For Aristotle, it was the concept of a rat, excellence of character, developed through repeated action. For the Stoics, it was the cultivation of a rational, disciplined mind. For Hermetic thinkers, it was alignment with the universal mind. Different language, same principle, you become what you consistently practice. Most people, however, never consciously choose their identity. It forms gradually, shaped by experience, reinforced by repetition, and eventually accepted as fixed. This is just who I am, they say, without realizing that who they are is the result of patterns they can in fact change. Identity is not static. Music, it is constructed. There was a man who believed himself to be indecisive. For years, he avoided making firm choices, often delaying action, second-guessing himself, and relying on others to lead. This pattern became his identity. He did not see it as a behavior. He saw it as a trait. I'm just not decisive, he would say. But one day, after missing an opportunity that required a simple, timely decision, music, he began to question this assumption. Not emotionally, but logically. Is this truly who I am, or is it something I have practiced repeatedly? The question changed everything, because if it was practice, it could be retrained. So he began small. Each day he made deliberate decisions, minor at first, then gradually more significant. He resisted the urge to delay. He accepted the possibility of error. He focused not on perfect outcomes, but on consistent action. And over time, something shifted. The hesitation weakened, the clarity strengthened, the identity began to change, not through affirmation, but through repeated evidence. He was no longer becoming decisive. He was practicing it. This is the reorientation. You do not change your life by wishing for different results. You change it by becoming the person who naturally produces those results. And that process begins internally with how you see yourself, how you think, how you respond. There was a woman who had always seen herself as someone who struggled financially, emotionally, professionally. This identity influenced her expectations, her decisions, and her tolerance for difficulty. She did not seek opportunity because she did not expect it. She did not pursue growth because she did not believe it was available to her. Her identity limited her before reality ever had the chance to. But when she began to shift, not by denying her past, but by redefining her present, her actions changed. She started making decisions aligned with someone who expected improvement. She invested time differently. She responded to challenges with curiosity instead of defeat. And gradually her life reflected that shift, not because the world suddenly favored her, but because she was now acting from a different internal position. This is the key. Your identity is the lens through which you interpret possibility. It determines what you attempt, what you avoid, what you believe is within reach. Music, and because it influences action, it ultimately shapes outcome. So here is the practice. Ask yourself, who must I become to experience the life I want? Not what you need to have, but who you need to be. What qualities would that version of you embody? How would they think? How would they respond? Then choose one of those qualities and practice it today. Not perfectly, just intentionally. Because identity is not declared, it is demonstrated. And each time you act in alignment with the person you intend to become, you reinforce that identity. You build evidence, you create momentum over time, the shift becomes natural, and what once felt like effort becomes character. This is how reality is shaped, not through force, but through alignment between who you are and what you do. Music, you are not fixed, you are forming, and the direction of that formation is now more than ever within your reach. Chapter 13. The illusion of separation. There is an ancient teaching whispered through the corridors of Hermetic tradition that declares a truth most people spend their lives avoiding. Separation is an illusion. The world appears divided. Self and other, mind and matter, observer and observed. But this division exists only at the surface of perception. Beneath it lies unity, seamless and indivisible. In the teachings attributed to Hermes Trismegist, it is said that the all is mind. This is not poetic language. It is a direct statement about the structure of reality. If all is mind, then what you call external is not truly separate from you. It is a projection, a reflection, a continuation of the same field of awareness you inhabit. Consider an old parable told among Neoplatonic circles. A man spent his entire life searching for a hidden kingdom said to exist beyond the mountains. He crossed deserts, climbed peaks, and endured storms only to discover in his final years that the kingdom had always existed within his own consciousness. What he saw as distant was never separate. The realization is unsettling at first. If separation is an illusion, then responsibility expands. You are no longer merely reacting to a world out there. You are participating in its formation. The boundaries blur, cause and effect intertwine. This is why ancient thinkers insisted that knowledge of unity was not for the unprepared mind. It dissolves excuses. It removes the comfort of distance. Look carefully at your own experience. When you perceive something, a person, an event, a situation, it does not exist for you outside of your awareness of it. Your experience of reality is always internal, always mediated by consciousness. Two facts stand side by side. The world feels external yet is known internally. Paradox. Music, and in that paradox lies power. A merchant in Alexandria once blamed his failures on the cruelty of the market. Music prices fell, ships were lost, deals collapsed. Yet an older trader, having witnessed decades of rise and fall, told him quietly, "You do not trade goods, you trade perception." The younger man dismissed this as nonsense. Years later, after countless losses, he realized the truth. His fear shaped his decisions. His decisions shaped his outcomes, and his outcomes confirmed his fear. The external world had mirrored his internal state with precision. This does not mean the world is imaginary in a trivial sense. It means it is relational, co-created through consciousness. Ancient Hermeticism and Platonic thought converge here. Reality is not denied but redefined. And here is where many go astray. They hear this teaching and assume it grants them control over everything. That is not its purpose. The purpose is alignment, not domination. When you recognize unity, you begin to move differently. You stop resisting what appears before you, because resistance assumes separation. Instead, you inquire, what within me corresponds to this? That question changes everything. A Stoic teacher once summarized this in a simple way. The obstacle is not outside you, it is your interpretation of it. That insight echoes across centuries because it points to the same hidden law. You are not separate from the field you experience, and so the practice becomes subtle yet profound. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me, you begin to ask, what is this revealing through me? This is the shift from victimhood to participation, from fragmentation to unity. A single sentence remains. Separation is a useful illusion. Your task is not to destroy the illusion, but to see through it. When you do, your relationship with reality changes. You stop chasing control and begin cultivating awareness. And in that awareness, something remarkable occurs. The world begins to respond differently, not because it has changed, but because you have. Chapter 14, The Discipline of Inner Alignment. Understanding that consciousness shapes reality is only the beginning. The greater challenge, the one that separates insight from transformation, is alignment. To know truth is one thing, to live it consistently is another. Ancient philosophers did not speak of knowledge as accumulation, they spoke of it as embodiment. In the tradition of Plato, the highest aim was not merely to glimpse the realm of forms, but to align one's life with it. Truth was not an idea to admire, it was a standard to live by. Anything less was considered a form of inner division. Music and division weakens power. A man may speak of clarity yet act in confusion. He may declare discipline yet surrender to impulse. In music, such a state, his consciousness becomes fragmented, and the results in his life reflect that fragmentation. This is why alignment is the hidden discipline behind all manifestation. It is not about forcing reality to obey your thoughts. It is about ensuring that your thoughts, actions, and inner state are not in conflict with one another. One ancient story tells of a sculptor who sought to carve the perfect statue. Music. Each day he worked tirelessly, refining every detail. Yet no matter how precise his technique, something always felt incomplete. Frustrated, music, he sought the guidance of an older master. The master observed his work in silence, then said, "Your hands are skilled, but your mind is divided. You shape the stone, but you do not embody the form you seek." The sculptor did not understand at first, but over time he realized the truth. He was striving for perfection externally while harboring doubt internally. His creation reflected his contradiction. Once he resolved this inner conflict, once his vision and belief aligned, his work transformed effortlessly. The principle is timeless. Modern language might call this cognitive dissonance, but the ancients understood it more intuitively. Music, when your inner world is inconsistent, your outer world becomes unstable. When your inner world is aligned, your outer world gains coherence. Two forces operate constantly, intention and contradiction. Balance. Whichever dominates shapes your reality. This is why many fail despite effort. They set goals, repeat affirmations, visualize outcomes, but beneath it all they carry opposing beliefs. They desire success but fear responsibility. They seek connection but resist vulnerability. The result is stagnation. Alignment requires honesty. It asks you to examine not just what you say you want, but what you truly believe. And this examination is rarely comfortable. A Roman philosopher once wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Music, this was not a comforting statement. It was a demanding one. It placed responsibility squarely where it belonged within Chapter 15, the return to awareness. There comes a moment, quiet, almost unannounced, when a person begins to sense that something within them has been forgotten, not lost, not destroyed, but buried beneath noise, habit, and distraction. The ancients did not call this ignorance. They called it sleep. In the fragments of Heraclitus, it is written that most people live as if asleep, not because they lack intelligence, music, but because their awareness is scattered, pulled outward into endless reaction rather than inward toward understanding. Awareness in its pure form is not thinking, it is seeing. A man once lived in a crowded city, surrounded by constant motion, voices, markets, obligations. Each day he reacted automatically, never questioning why he felt restless, why dissatisfaction followed him like a shadow. One evening, after a long day of noise, he wandered beyond the city walls and sat in silence for the first time in years. At first, the silence disturbed him. His thoughts grew louder, his anxiety sharpened, but he remained. Gradually, something shifted. He began to notice his own mind, its patterns, its fears, its repetitions. For the first time, he was not lost inside his thoughts. He was observing them. That moment changed everything. Awareness had returned. The ancient traditions all point toward this same threshold. Whether in Stoic reflection, Hermetic contemplation, or Platonic inquiry, the instruction is consistent. Return to yourself, not the surface self shaped by habit, but the deeper awareness that witnesses all experience. Music two states exist simultaneously, thinking and observing, choice. Most live in the first, few awaken to the second, and yet music, this shift is subtle. It does not require withdrawal from the world, nor does it demand extreme discipline. It begins with a simple act, pausing, a pause between stimulus and response. This was the hidden power described by Epictetus. He taught that while events themselves may be beyond your control, your response is always within it, but this response is not automatic. It emerges from awareness. Without awareness, reaction dominates. With awareness, choice appears. Consider how often you move through your day without noticing your own state. A word from another person triggers irritation. A memory triggers regret. A future concern triggers anxiety. Each reaction feels immediate, justified, real, but awareness interrupts this chain. It reveals that between the event and your reaction there is a space, and in that space something extraordinary exists, the ability to choose. A single sentence captures it. Awareness creates distance from impulse, and in that distance, power returns. A teacher once demonstrated this to his students using a simple exercise. He asked them to sit quietly and observe their thoughts for 10 minutes. Most could not last 2. They became restless, distracted, uncomfortable. Not because the task was difficult, but because they had never practiced awareness. Their minds were not under their guidance. They were under their minds. This is the condition most people unknowingly live in. Music, but awareness reverses it. When you begin to observe your thoughts rather than identify with them, their influence weakens, patterns become visible, reactions slow, music, clarity emerges. This is not mystical in the sense of fantasy. It is practical in the deepest sense. It changes how you experience every moment of your life. The Stoics' music practiced this daily. The Hermetic thinkers framed it as awakening from illusion. The Platonic traditions saw it as turning away from shadows toward truth. Different language, same realization. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who sees them. And once this becomes clear, a quiet transformation begins. You no longer chase every impulse. You no longer believe every fear. You no longer react blindly to every circumstance. Instead, you observe, and in observing, you regain authority over your inner world. A final story may illuminate this. A soldier returning from war found himself unable to rest. Every sound startled him. Every silence felt uneasy. He believed something was wrong with the world, but an older mentor told him, the world has not changed. Your awareness has become trapped in reaction. Through slow practice, breathing, observing, pausing, music, the soldier began to reclaim his awareness. His reaction softened, his perception cleared. Peace did not come from changing the world, but from changing his relationship to it. That is the return not to a place, but to a state of being. Actionable insights several times a day. Pause for 1 minute. Observe your thoughts without judgment. Do not control them. Simply notice. This strengthens awareness and weakens unconscious reaction. Quiet Mastery, Chapter 16. The Rebirth of the Self. When awareness returns, something deeper begins to unfold. Something the ancients described not as change, but as rebirth. This word is often misunderstood. It does not mean becoming someone else. It means remembering who you were before conditioning shaped you. The Greeks spoke of the psyche as possessing inherent power, reason, virtue, self-mastery. These were not traits to be acquired, but qualities to be uncovered, forgotten, not lost. And so rebirth is not creation, it is recognition. A philosopher once told his student, "You are not becoming wise, you are removing what obscures wisdom." The student, confused, asked how something so powerful could be forgotten. The philosopher replied, "Because it is quiet and the world is loud." That answer carries more truth than it first appears. From early life, you are shaped by external influences, expectations, fears, beliefs passed down without examination. Over time, these layers form what you call your identity, yet beneath them something remains unchanged. The question is whether you will return to it. Two forces define your life: conditioning and awareness, balance. Whichever you strengthen determines who you become. A man once inherited a great estate, but he did not know it. Raised in poverty, he believed himself to be poor. Music, he worked endlessly, struggled constantly, and lived with limitation. One day a letter arrived confirming his inheritance, land, wealth, resources beyond his imagination. At first he doubted music it, then he resisted it, finally he accepted it. But here is the crucial detail. His life did not change the moment the inheritance was confirmed. It changed the moment he believed it. His external reality followed his internal recognition. This is the essence of rebirth. You already possess the capacity for clarity, discipline, and strength. But if you do not recognize it, you cannot act from it. Music, and if you do not act from it, your life reflects its absence. The Stoics understood this deeply. Music, Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself not to gain wisdom, but to remember it. His writings were not instructions for others, they were reminders to himself, because even those who understand can forget. Rebirth music, then, is a continuous process. It is not a single moment of realization, but a series of returning again and again to awareness, to clarity, to truth. And with each return, the false layers weaken. A craftsman working with marble once described his process in a simple way. I do not create the statue, I remove what is not the statue. Over time, the form reveals itself. So it is with the self. You do not need to build strength. You need to remove weakness. You do not need to acquire discipline. You need to remove distraction. You do not need to search for clarity. You need to remove confusion. What remains is what has always been there. A short sentence remains. You are uncovering, not becoming. And this realization changes your approach to life. Instead of striving endlessly to be more, you begin to simplify. You eliminate what does not serve. You question what you once accepted. You refine your thoughts, your habits, your actions. This is where philosophy becomes practical. Man once asked a Stoic teacher how to transform his life. The teacher did not give him a grand theory. He gave him a daily practice. Each morning, remind yourself who you are capable of being. Each evening, examine whether you lived accordingly. Simple, demanding, effective. Over time, the man changed not because he forced transformation, but because he aligned with it consistently. And that is the final truth of rebirth. It is not dramatic. It is disciplined. It is not external. It is internal. It is not sudden. It is gradual, yet its effects are undeniable. When you remember who you are, your decisions change. When your decisions change, your actions follow. When your actions align, your life begins to reflect that alignment. The world may appear the same, but you are not. And because you are not, your experience of it transforms. Chapter 17. Living in alignment. There is a point in every seeker's journey where understanding is no longer enough. Ideas once thrilling begin to feel weightless unless they are lived. The ancient schools of thought were never interested in knowledge as decoration. They demanded embodiment. In the tradition of Socrates, philosophy was not lecture, it was examination of life itself. He did not ask what people believed, he asked how they lived. Because belief without alignment is only noise dressed as wisdom. Alignment begins where contradiction ends. A merchant in an old coastal city once studied the teachings of balance and virtue. Music, he could quote them fluently, impressing those around him with insight. Yet in trade, he deceived music customers when profit was uncertain. At home, he spoke of integrity, but acted with impatience and anger. Over time, something strange occurred. His life began to fracture. Deals collapsed without clear reason. Relationships became strained. His health weakened. He could not understand why music, until an older philosopher asked him a simple question. Are your words and your actions in agreement? The merchant fell silent. That was the moment he realized alignment is not intellectual, it is structural. Music, when inner belief, spoken word, and outward action diverge, life becomes unstable, not as punishment but as reflection. Two forces operate in every human being in tension and contradiction. Balance. When they move together, life flows. When they oppose each other, life resists. Ancient Stoics describe this as living in accordance with nature. Not nature as external wilderness, but nature as the rational order within and around all things, what they called Epictetus and others referred to as logos. To live against that order was to live in friction with reality itself. A soldier once trained under a Stoic commander described a lesson that changed him forever. During preparation for battle, fear spread through the ranks. The soldiers were skilled but internally divided, confident in training yet uncertain in spirit. The commander gathered them and said, "We do not win because we are strong, we win because we are not divided." That sentence became the turning point. Music, the army did not change its weapons or strategy, it changed its internal state. Fear was acknowledged but not obeyed. Doubt was observed but not followed. When battle came, they moved as one. Alignment creates coherence, and coherence produces strength. In psychological terms, this is the absence of internal conflict. In ancient terms, it is harmony of the soul. Different language, music, same reality, but alignment is not achieved once it is maintained. Every day presents micro-decisions where fragmentation or unity is chosen. Music, you say you value peace, but engage in unnecessary conflict. You say you seek clarity, but indulge confusion. You say you desire growth, but resist discomfort. Each contradiction weakens alignment. And yet the solution is not perfection, it is awareness. A craftsman once explained his work with metal in simple terms. Music, the metal tells me where it is strong and where it resists. I do not force it, I follow its truth. Over time, the shape emerges. So it is with life. You are not meant to force alignment through pressure. You are meant to notice misalignment and gently correct it. A single sentence captures this. Alignment is correction repeated over time. Not intensity, not ambition, consistency. When your inner world stabilizes, external life begins to reorganize around it. Opportunities feel clearer, decisions feel lighter, resistance decreases. This is not mysticism in the abstract. It is psychological coherence expressed through experience. A man once studied the teachings of ancient philosophy for years, but felt no change in his life. One day, frustrated, he asked a teacher, "Why do I understand so much yet change so little?" The teacher replied, "Because you have made understanding your goal instead of alignment your practice." That distinction altered everything. From that moment, the man stopped collecting ideas and began testing them. Every belief was examined through behavior, music, every principle was applied in action. Slowly, his life began to shift, not dramatically but structurally, because alignment does not announce itself. It reveals itself through stability, actionable insight. Identify one contradiction between your values and your actions, corrected today through behavior, not intention. Alignment is built through execution, not insight alone. Chapter 18, The Power You Never Lost. There is a strange irony at the heart of human experience. What is most powerful within you is often what you forget you possess. Ancient traditions repeatedly point to this paradox. The idea is not that you must acquire strength, clarity, or wisdom, but that you must remember them. In early Hermetic thought attributed to Hermes Trismegist, human beings were described as reflections of a greater intelligence, not separate from it, but participating in it. The divine spark was not distant, it was embedded, yet distraction creates amnesia. A traveler once wandered through many lands searching for a sacred object said to grant enlightenment. He studied with teachers, endured hardship, and collected countless teachings. Still, he felt incomplete. One evening, exhausted, he sat beside a river and saw his reflection in the water. In that moment, something shifted. He realized he had been searching for something that had never left him. The realization was not emotional, it was immediate. The search ended not because he found something new, but because he recognized what was always present. This is the essence of remembering. A similar truth appears in Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind has the capacity for clarity, resilience, and order, but it becomes clouded when overwhelmed by external impressions. The power is never lost, it is obscured. Two states define the human condition: forgetting and remembering. Transition. Most people live in forgetting, reacting, absorbing, drifting through inherited patterns. Few learn to pause and return to awareness of what they already are. The power you seek is not outside you, it is the ability to see clearly within you. A blacksmith once explained his craft in a way that surprised those who heard it. "I do not add strength to iron," he said. "I remove weakness through heat and pressure." He revealed what was already inside the metal. The same principle applies to consciousness. You are not becoming powerful. You are removing what conceals your power: fear, distraction, inherited belief, unconscious reaction. These are not your identity. They are layers, and beneath them something stable remains. A Roman philosopher once wrote in Solitude, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." This was not motivational language. It was diagnostic, a reminder of structure, because if you cannot govern your inner world, external mastery becomes impossible. But when inner clarity returns, something remarkable happens. Life simplifies, decisions require less effort, emotional turbulence decreases. Focus sharpens naturally, not because the world has changed, but because perception has stabilized. A woman once described her transformation after years of anxiety. She said, "Nothing in my life changed at first, but I stopped believing every thought I had, and that changed everything." That statement contains more truth than most complex theories. The power you never lost is attention governed by awareness. Where attention goes, experience follows. Where awareness governs attention, experience becomes intentional rather than reactive. This is why ancient teachings emphasized remembrance, not learning something new, but returning to what is already known beneath noise. A short sentence captures it. You are not seeking power, you are clearing what hides it. When this becomes clear, effort changes form. Instead of striving to add, you begin refining. Instead of chasing, you begin observing. Instead of forcing, you begin aligning. And slowly something subtle but profound occurs. Life responds differently, not because reality has been altered externally, but because your relationship to it has become coherent. The same world experienced through a different state becomes an entirely different experience. A final teaching from ancient traditions suggests this simply. When the mind is still, reality is understood as it is, not as fear distorts it. That stillness is not emptiness, it is clarity. And in clarity, power is not created, it is recognized.